Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera. Welcome back. And today, in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, we're talking to Deirdre Jarvis about her book, The Crystal Pawn. So I've already got questions. So let's get her in here. Welcome, Deirdre.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell us about The Crystal Pawn.
So Crystal Pawn, and I'll read you the back of the book. We'll give you the blurb, and then we can go into it a little bit more. But it basically is Deirdre Hawes has never thought of her life as extraordinary until one day she met her father. She never knew she had, and thus began the adventure of a lifetime in another world. Armed only with the knowledge that she is heir to special magical gifts and is the only one who might call on the aid of the long-vanished dragonkin, she finds herself drawn into a web of intrigue and murder that sends her into the care of the one being who can save her, if only she can find a way to gain his trust and give her own in return.
Ooh.
So it is the beginning of the book. And there's a lot that goes on. So questions, you said you had questions. I'll be happy to dive right into those.
Well, I wanted to know, like, what the title, like Crystal Pawn, like, is there a crystal pawn in the book? Like, is there a literal crystal pawn, or is it a figurative, or like?
There's an interesting story behind the title.
Oh, I like stories.
The second book is called The Ivory Queen, and originally this was all one book titled The Ivory Queen. And that ties into the fact that one of the castles is called the Ivory Castle, and that is the seat where her family has power in the kingdom. But it was too long, and if you read about fantasy novels, a lot of times they say, oh, it shouldn't be more than X amount of words for this particular thing. And I said, well, I'm twice that, so I think I need to cut it in half. So one of my friends and I were sitting around having coffee at one point, and he suggested The Crystal Pawn based on the fact that one of the main castles in the kingdom is made of opaque crystal. So the big giant blocks of opaque crystal. So he's like, well, I mean, if you've got the queen and you've got this idea here, let's move with the chess theme. And he says, let's go with the crystal pawn because she's being basically moved as a chess piece throughout the beginning of this. And then the second book, you get a little bit further and she gets a little bit further. And then the third book, which is titled The Ebon King and is in process right now, carries that chess theme a little bit further.
So now I'm curious, how long was it before you split it?
I think it was somewhere around 700 pages. So it was quite large.
Word count for that? Because like pages, depending on the font size and the line spacing, like that doesn't tell you anything about. No. Yeah.
So I think it was somewhere, because I think the standard is like 120,000 words for fantasy. It's 90 to 120,000. It was twice that. So it was definitely up in the 250,000 word range.
I'm curious where you saw that figure, because fantasy, I mean, if you're going for traditional publishing, then you want to be in the 90 to 120 range. But if you're not,
originally I was thinking about traditional publishing, which is why we split it.
Gotcha.
And then eventually I said, well, here comes the pandemic. What am I definitely need to just publish instead of waiting to see. So I said, okay, we're going to jump on this and do the work ourselves.
Gotcha. Because like a lot of I read epic fantasy myself, and like books, it tends to like range with the story, and like 200,000 to 250,000 word epic fantasy book is like, it's not unusual.
No, and I've come to realize
it's just unwieldy.
Yeah. And like The Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer, which is fairly substantial. It's like this big.
I mean, I can think of a number of like indie authors whose books are regularly over the 200,000 mark. And like, I don't go over that because like I find for me, trying to manage a story that's 100, that starts to get to be like, once you get over 120,000 words, it starts to get really hard to manage it, because if you read a lot, and I do, and you're reading a lot of books that are in the 90 to 120 with the 3-act structure, like once you get over 120, like it's very, you're like, wait, I did the 3 acts. Now what do we do? We're not done with the story, but like it's like structurally, it starts to get hard to manage. And so like because I have one book that's 165,000 words. It is a beast.
Right.
But it should have been cut into 2 books, but I didn't want to do that. So I split them inside the book, but I didn't
Well,
make them separate books,
that
you
worked too.
know. I just did that because the structure I couldn't like get it once I split them in half, like in like said, this is book one, this is part one of book one, which is its own complete book, and this is part two of this book, which is a complete book. And then it was much easier to manage it because you have your beginning, middle, and end of each part. Yeah. I'm
And
sorry,
I
I didn't
think
mean to digress. It's just when you
no,
said you
that's
split it, like I'm
absolutely
always like, really, why did you split
yeah,
it?
no, so that was the
Because
reason
that's
why.
a because I've split books like after that, I was like, forget it. I don't care. We're splitting it. We're not going to do this again. This was just too much labor mentally.
I think what I'm seeing though is even when after I split it,
hmm
the second book is bigger than the first.
Okay. So you got
So and
room
I
to
feel like
grow without it
the
getting
third,
unwieldy. Yeah.
it did grow. It did get bigger as myself and my editor, we worked very closely together to go through it and make it what it originally, what it ended up becoming. And I think that the Eben King is probably going to exceed that too. So it'll be big,
Okay.
that one. They seem to be growing.
Yeah, no, that's a problem that we all face. Not to hijack this, but the book that has the two books inside it is Cursebreaker Enchanted.
Okay.
Now we're gonna go back to the Crystal Pond. We're not
Okay.
talking about my books, but since I mentioned it and was talking about it, I just want to say which book of
it
mine it
was.
is. Is the one I'm always talking about on here, so no big surprise there.
No problem.
And now we're not going to talk about my books at all anymore. We're only going to focus on Deb Jarvis. She is the queen of this episode. So, should we jump into the excerpt? Should we meet these characters that we've just heard about her
Well,
plight?
I can talk to you a little bit about the
Oh, no,
characters
go ahead.
before we jump
Yeah.
in, just so you kind of get an idea.
Sure.
So the excerpt I'm reading is about halfway through the book, and it's kind of a turning point of the story, because a lot of what happens in the sequence that this is from leads into them breaking off from the original plan. I mean, the original plan was she had been brought to the castle and by her father, and she'd been introduced to the queen, and they're like, okay, we have a plan about how we're going to get you to find the dragons, and we're going to send an invitation to the dragons and see about getting them to come here because we don't want to risk you. And they're like, but in the meantime, there's this event that with all the other castle lords and ladies, we really think you ought to go to it. And so they're like, okay, this makes total sense. We'll just go off to this event. Sure, why not? But that ends up being very pivotal, that particular interaction. It's the safest place to send her at this point in time to get her out of the castle, get her out of the intrigue. So she does end up going, gets attacked on the way, rescued by a very interesting character, and then does eventually end up at the destination, which is Ganley Manor, which is kind of almost like a Southern plantation style house. And there's a reason for that. There's parts of this world that seem to have crept into Kirlismus in various places, just because there are portals that connect Kirlismus to our world in various places. And that's going to become very pivotal in the third book as well. So at this point, she's at Ganley Manor. She's met Lady Judith, who is the lady of the manor, and is, been taken up, given her suite, and gotten ready for going to the first dinner. So the section I'm going to read is Lady Judith is coming to get her to bring her to dinner, and it's going to show her kind of a little bit of a side trip to kind of show her the kind of people she's going to be dealing with. So I'll jump into that and read.
Okay.
So we'll see where we are in the book. So it's chapter 12 in the book. As they traveled through the halls, Deirdre tried to assuage her nervousness at meeting the other lords and ladies. She was not sure what they would make of her. As Judith was the only one she was even a little familiar with, her discomfort was growing, and her step became more hesitant. "Nervous, my lady?" asked Judith, turning to look at her with a smile. "I think I have something that will prepare you for this dinner." They reached the stairs, but they didn't go down as Deirdre had expected. Instead, Judith led her halfway round the landing again to another corridor, this one darker and narrower. "Where are we going?" asked Deirdre. Lady Judith shushed her quietly and opened the first door they came to. She ushered Deirdre inside, closing the door behind them. It was pitch black inside, but Judith took her hand and pulled her along effortlessly. Deirdre heard the soft sound of a curtain being pulled aside and was startled to see two small holes of light appear in the wall near the floor. Voices wafted up from below. In the dim light, Deirdre could see the earnest look on Judith's face as she motioned Deirdre to sit. Lady Margaret and I have known each other a long time, Lady Judith whispered. She has given me a little of your background and has confided in me what you plan to do. I am with you on this. No offense to the Queen, but locking you away in the castle will make you an easy target. You will surely fall into a routine and become vulnerable, just like Darlena. Darlena was her half-sister who was murdered. How much did she tell you? Asked Deirdre softly. She did not reveal too much, but I know what your plan is involved finding Jack Parnes. I can help you find him. Jack Parnes has a wealth of knowledge of all things regarding the southern areas of Kirlismus. He would know where to find just about anything and anyone. Therefore, I am going with you. Wait, what? What about your lands? Asked Deirdre. What will happen to them if you help me? They are forfeit anyway if the Prestalians conquer the country. I would rather take my chances with you. Jan is assembling clothing, food, and other staples for the road. I will make sure we are well provisioned. Overall will stay here and guard the lands until, or if, I return. I also have a horse that the Minotaur can ride if he is able. How did you ever... Or am I being too nosy? We have agreed to protect each other, said Deirdre. He knows what will happen to him if he gets caught alone. Can Jan be trusted? He's as mute as your friend, loyal to me and smarter than anyone I have ever known, Judith nodded. We are very fond of each other, Jan and I. A muted sound reached their ears, and Judith pointed abruptly to the round holes in the wall. Take a look, she said. Deirdre crept over to one of the holes and did as she was instructed. Sitting slightly below her vantage point was an assembly of men and women around a large, ornately set dining table. They were talking in loud voices, making no effort to be quiet. So where are they? Asked a russet-haired man with a look of perpetual boredom on his face. How long does it take to fetch someone? Lord Jasper of Ganley Keep, whispered Judith in Deirdre's ear. Quite the scoundrel. Not someone to tangle with. He's a lot more aware than he appears. A woman with sandy blonde, shoulder-length hair and piercing blue eyes made an exasperated sound. She appeared to be about Deirdre's age and was dressed in royal blue with lighter blue lace at the throat and wrist. She set down her glass with an overly loud thump and glared at Jasper. My lord, said the Lady Deirdre has been through some very hard trials as of late, some of which are potentially linked with your house and your father. She has every right to be late if she so chooses. Jasper lounged in his seat, one arm thrown over the back of the chair, the other raised his half-drained wineglass to his lips. In contrast to his black velvet doublet and pale face, the dark red wine possessed great vitality. Draining the goblet, he set the heavy crystal down hard, echoing the lady's action. What my father does or does not do is of no concern of mine. The lord of House of Ganley can rot for all I care. My father is more than content to rule his domain, and he tells me little of it. I, however, much prefer the gentle companies of ladies and the lucky roll of the dice, now and again. Deirdre watched the red-haired man with a combination of amusement and concern as a servant hurried to refill his glass. She had seen men like him before. This Jasper Ganley was a great actor, but something in his attitude made her wonder what his real motives were. Was he here to spy for his father? What was his real agenda? The lady in blue spoke again, her whole attitude one of anger. It is of no surprise to you that your father is not well loved by any of this company, she snapped. However, like it or not, you still have the job to act like his emissary while you are here. What you do in your spare time is none of our affairs. Hear, hear, spoke up a thin man dressed in green. I must agree with the Lady Lorelei. None here need to be reminded of your hobbies. What all of us are concerned about is what your family may be involved in this attack. His words had risen to a crescendo, and when he was done, the air rang momentarily, leaving a brief, uncomfortable silence behind. Lord Jasper leaned forward, folded his hands in front of him on the table, and looked the speaker long and hard, a half-sneer twisting his face. Do you really believe for 1 minute, Lord Percy, that Lady Deirdre, that half-spawn bastard from some backwoods farm in the mountain reaches, that unlanded lady, that Minotaur lover, could save anyone, much less herself? If my father's wolves had attacked her, which I very much doubt, she would be dead by now. Dark wolves indeed. spat Lord Jasper. He raised his glass and drained it, slamming it angrily on the table once again. Deirdre stared at him aghast. Nerfal had warned her that people might think of her in such terms, but this was the first she had heard it spoken. She was shocked, however, that he would try to discredit her and imply that she was in no mortal danger. This was akin to tossing her to the very wolves that she had avoided. "We should get down there," Lady Judith said softly. "This could get out of hand." Okay. And then it
Oh.
goes from there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to continue.
So she then goes down and there's a confrontation and so forth. So
can we hear that? Or is
would
that
you
too
like
much
to?
of a spoiler? Okay, look, I'm as I've said many times before, I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm an audiobook addict. So I love hearing books read, and especially authors reading them. Like, that's such a treat. So like, I'm not gonna say no. I'm like not the person to ask.
I'll read a little further.
Okay.
Further. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Deirdre let Lady Judith guide her back to the door, and after closing it behind them, they went swiftly along the corridor to the staircase. Lady Judith lifted the hem of her skirts and fairly flew down the stairs, forcing Deirdre to do the same in order to keep up. At the bottom, they turned and entered the hallway that Deirdre had seen Lady Judith originally emerged from when they arrived. It opened into another corridor, this one brightly lit with many doors, outside one of which stood Jan. When he saw Lady Judith, he gestured wildly at the closed portal behind which came sounds of muffled arguing. Lady Judith pointed up and said, "Dinner." Jan nodded and raced down the other end of the corridor. "Ready?" asked Judith softly. Deirdre nodded, and they entered the room. Inside was a small antechamber, richly paneled in light maple, and another door through which came the sounds of the altercation, now even more alarming. Lady Judith opened the second portal without hesitation, barging into an argument in full swing. Deirdre followed her, but hung back a little, not sure if she were ready to be part of the scene. The tension in the room had escalated to the point where several of the guests were out of their chairs, some with their hands resting on the pommels of their daggers. All were glaring at Lord Jasper with a mixture of disgust and outright malice. Lord Jasper was poised in a ready stance, glaring at his accusers with equal animosity. "What is going on?" demanded Lady Judith. "We are supposed to be having a formal dinner, not an opportunity for you all to air your grievances. What is the meaning of this?" She turned to Deirdre and gave her a deep curtsy accompanied by a small wink. "My Lady Deirdre, I do apologize. This is not the normal occurrence at my residence. Please take your seat, and I will sort this out immediately. Your trials have already taken enough from you as it is." Lady Judith turned back to the others, most of whom had bowed or curtsied and taken their seats again. Deirdre stepped forward to look at the other dinner guests. With the exception of Jasper, they looked back at her with polite curiosity. Jasper, however, remained standing, glaring at Deirdre. She wondered what she had done for him to view her with such animosity. "Please be seated," said Lady Judith. "Lady Lorelei, would you please enlighten us as to why we have been treated to this display of aggression?" "Certainly, my lady," said Lady Lorelei with a touch of glee. She turned to look at Lord Jasper. "My lord was enlightening us as to his opinion of Lady Deirdre, and his unequaled faith or lack thereof concerning her position in the upcoming war." "He insulted her," spat the man in green, Lord Percy, rising to his feet again. "Why be tactful, my lady? He insulted Lady Deirdre fully and without cause. We all heard the survivors' reports. Only dark wolves could have caused the chaos that loosed on the party 3 days ago. Yet he implies that it was a band of rogue wolves that attacked. Rubbish!" "Lord Jasper," Lady Judith turned to the heir of Ganley's seat, "is that the truth?" "I believe that covers it nicely, yes," sneered Lord Jasper. "My opinions, however, are my own, Lady Judith. The counsel I keep, I think, shall be the same." He pushed a chair back and stormed out of the room, giving Deirdre a cold look as he passed. The door slammed behind him, and all could hear him stomping off down the corridor. No one breathed for a long moment, and then Lady Judith cleared her throat. "Be seated again, my Lord of Chadwick," she said. "My lady, sit here next to me, to my right. Lord Jasper seems to have had a great deal to say, my lords and ladies. It looks as though we shall be spared his thoughts for now, at least until the ball. And I will stop there.
So let's talk about who all these people are and what's going on with these dark wolves and many questions. Let's start there.
So all of the different lords and ladies are the castle owners in the kingdom. They're the ones who are the major landed gentry, I guess you would say. And they're the ones who would be working most closely with Deirdre in her position in the castle and in the realm. So the introduction of her to them was considered to be very important because they needed to know who she was. Lord Jasper, however, has definitely taken a different tact to things. And without going into spoilers too much, because I don't want to go into spoilers too much, he has his very own reasons for doing what he does. He has his reasons for why he prefers the gentle company of ladies and the lucky roll of the dice. There's a lot of underlying tension with him. And there's some interesting things you find out about him later.
Yeah, he sounds like an interesting guy. So he doesn't seem to like Deirdre. Doesn't have a very high opinion of her.
Right. And I mean, I think that kind of, he's saying a lot of what others might be thinking, where she came into the castle grounds with this very feared figure, because she did get found by a minotaur after the attack. And they've agreed to protect each other and to keep each other safe. And there's some assumptions that are there because of what minotaurs represent in the realms. They're feared and not considered to be safe to be around. So the fact that she's with him implies that there might be something else between them that has led to this kind of animosity.
What is that scene that where they were attacked and became friends and pledged to sort of watch each other's back? Is that in the book, or did that happen before the opening of the book? Okay.
Yeah,
so
that,
where does that excerpt come in? Is that chapter 2, chapter 3?
The one I read?
Yeah.
That's chapter 12. So it's a little bit of the
Oh,
way through the book, but it's at a major turning point in the book
yes.
where she is going to strike out on her own and try and
Okay.
figure out. Because she, earlier on, you do find out from a discussion she has with a magician at the castle that there's some suspicion that search parties to find the dragons might never have been actually sent.
So prior to this, there were people supposedly looking for the dragons, and
Yes,
maybe that was a fabrication
it might have been a fabrication
or an exaggeration.
something like that, or they might even have found them and were turned away, so we're not sure at this
or they
point.
were eaten.
You do find out later in the second book what exactly did occur, but
I see.
There is information given at that point.
I mean, or the dragons could have bribed them. I mean, if they've got a hoard full of gold, hey, take this gold. Forget you ever saw me.
Exactly. But it is, she's given this piece of advice. You might want to not just wait for them to come back, because we're not even sure they were actually sent.
And what's going on with these references to the dark wolves?
So the dark wolves are controlled by Jasper Ganley's father. They're creatures that he works with, and there's a backstory about the Lord of Ganley Keep throughout the creation of this particular kingdom. His dealings with some of the evil forces in the land, and an agreement that was made with the evil forces in the land that is part of one of the reasons why Jasper is the way he is.
I see. So it sounds like we've got humans, and we've got magic users, and we've got other races that are humanoid or shapeshifters. So tell us about that, about the different races that live in your lands, and are they landed gentry, or is it only humans who are landed gentry, or like what's going on in that?
For the most part, it's the humans that are the landed gentry. There's a little bit of a discomfort between the magic races and the humans. And it wasn't originally that way when the country was formed, because it was people who were pretty open to it. But over time, there's been a jealousy that's been building between the humans and the kin, who are the hornless kin would be related to the shapers, but they don't have the power to change into animals. And then the shapers, who live in the mountain reaches, which is a small section of Kirilismus, and they are landed gentry up there. But there's the hornless kin, who are related to them by blood but don't have the ability to shapeshift. So there's some jealousy there that's built up over time. There are centaurs, there are the dragons, obviously. There is a unicorn who starts showing up throughout the book. And he doesn't stick around with them all that much, but he's definitely present. And you see more of him in book 2 as the story progresses, and he's very prevalent in book 3. So it's just, he had left the land when the land was formed because of the death of his mate, and did not want anything to do with Kirilismus again until things started like not going well, and then was kind of drawn back, not really wanting to come back, but he was the only one who could figure out, okay, well, looks like there is another child by Countnerfall up the mountain reaches. His daughter Darlena was killed. I guess I have to step in, because he knew about it.
So how do the humans end up on top if they're, with as the landed gentry, when there's magic users and magical races around? Because
There
like
was something
humans,
that was,
they wouldn't win against magic.
no, well, there was, so the Bristolians, which is the country that's poised to attack now, had been attacking 300 years in the past, and there were some humans who had come into Kirilismus who had, fought with the Kirilithians and had agreed to, stay and help watch over them. And the idea was that they would be more likely to understand what kind of things the Bristolians might try in the future. So it kind of evolved. They were given the position of, okay, as long as you are working with the shapers, and as long as you have this interaction with them, and which is where the hornless can come in, because there was marriage between the two sides. As long as those things were there, then we're going to be okay with it. And the dragons are like, yep, we're good with this. We're going to leave you to this, and we're going to go south. We don't want to be part of this. So the dragons left, some of the shapers left, the unicorns went across the sea for wherever they went. They have a place that they are from, and kind of left it to the humans up till now. And then things have been going poorly.
So it sounds like Deirdre is not exactly human.
No, she is definitely part shaper, but she inherited the gifts.
So she can shapeshift.
She can shapeshift, and her father's line has three shapes, whereas most of the shaper clans only have one.
And what are her shapes?
So as the time goes by, she learns horse and peregrine falcon and otter.
What does she do with her mass when she's a peregrine falcon, or is she like a 5 foot something peregrine falcon? I ask only because, like, I read the Jane Yellow Rock series, and when she becomes a smaller creature, she like has to put her mass into something and then pick it up again when she becomes human, and it's a painful process.
That just is never really talked about. It's more of the change becomes very amorphous, and then they are the creature that they are, or the change becomes amorphous, and then they are themselves. So it's not something that I ever look too far into. It's magic. Here we are with our magic. It's our magic system. We just have to suspend disbelief here.
Ever since I read that, I was like, okay, now I want to know how it works in other people's magic systems.
Well, I've read a lot of the systems. I've read a lot, like the Chesuli cycle by Jennifer R. Robertson, which is an older novel series. And they talk about kind of giving their form to the land and accepting this other form. And
I like
however it works, I just decided I wasn't going to overly complicate things.
So. I like when things are somewhat complicated, I guess. I'm weird. I spend time thinking about these things.
We're just going with it's magic. It's magic. We're just
and that's totally fine, because magic, magic can do impossible things.
Mm-hmm.
That's its job.
I know. So we're not quite sure exactly what it's all about, but we're going to just go with it. It's magic.
So why is that other country whose name I
The
sounded like
Bristolians,
Crystal? Yeah, why are they attacking the
Keralithians.
Carolithians?
Yeah. Part of it is a religious thing. There's a religious belief in the Bristolians that the country over here is, in Kirilismus, is basically, plagued with demons. The Shapers are demons is kind of the idea. Originally, that was the people who came from Pristalia to Kirilismus originally were leaving to escape religious persecution, found the safety in Kirilismus and stayed and fought with the Keralithians. Now it's the antagonist and a few other people want the power for themselves, and so have been working with the Pristalians to find a way to get them back into the country to take it over, with the promise that they would rule, Kirilismus if they were able to get help overthrowing it. So the Pristalians have been trying to get back through for about 300 years, and they finally have been getting aid from certain individuals in Kirilismus to do so.
And why are those people aiding them?
They want power. They really do.
Oh.
There's some jealousy, certainly, with one of the main antagonists. He doesn't like being kind of second fiddle, and he didn't like some of the things that happened with the royalty. And why didn't it come to me? Why did it go to this person instead of coming to me? I'm the eldest, but that isn't the way the line of the lineage works.
How does it work?
It generally goes to the eldest child of the ruling family. But because the eldest child of the ruling family was female, the main antagonist did not feel that it should go to her. So there was a jealousy.
So Deirdre's not is Deirdre in that line, or is that separate?
She's not. She's in the line, but kind of distant. She doesn't have. She would normally not be in the line of succession.
So she's just there to go find the dragons, not for any other.
At this point in time, no. If she were to marry into royalty, yes, but she really hates the main antagonist, so it's
okay. So there's no possibility of that happening.
No possibility of that happening. No.
So okay. So after the point that you read, is that you said that's when Deirdre strikes out on her own. Where does she go? What does she do?
So from there, they go to find Jack Parnes. So a little bit of background history on Jack Parnes. He is a character who was very close to the Queen Brenna at one point, and through machinations of the main antagonist, there were aspersions cast upon him that he did something illegal, and then he was basically banished from the castle. And he's taken up residence to the south. Not too many people know where, but there are people who know where to find him. So they're going to be looking to go and search him out. So from that point where I read, they're going to be going to find Jack Parnes, because he actually has met a dragon in his travels, supposedly. So the idea is they're going to go and get him to tell them, hey, where did you meet this dragon? We need to find this thing.
Why does she need to find the dragons?
Because they have to go and actually figure out what the dragons want her to do in order to get them to help. So
okay.
Yep. So she needs to get their help to fight back the Pristalians, because they have a much bigger army. The idea is to call the dragons. It's only her lineage that will be capable of doing this. And unless they get the dragons to come up to them, they have to go down to find the dragons.
So she needs to go make a deal with the dragons to help her people.
Yeah.
I see. And what's in it for the dragons? What is she going to offer the dragons in order to help, to get their help? Is they're not going to do it for free.
They definitely will get a little bit more interest in the country, I think is a good way to put it. And there's an agreement with all the dragons that one of the dragons calls for help, they will answer. And one of the things that she has in the lineage is the possible potential to be able to become a dragon, but it's going to take something that the dragons have that she has to get.
So she needs to become a dragon, get into trouble so that she can call the other dragons to come and save her country and her.
Not even get into trouble, just make the call, pick up the phone, make the call.
But I think she ought to be in trouble for that. They might not be happy if they come and she's just standing in a field.
There's an army coming to attack. I think that's in trouble. That would count as in trouble.
That's wild. So how does her lineage have dragons in it?
It goes back to the origin of the Shapers, because there was a dragon in their background.
I'm guessing that was a dragon shifter.
In human form. Yeah. He was able to take human form. So somewhere in the background, there was a dragon. And so because of that connection, that lineage is there. And it's in her father's lineage, so therefore it comes down to hers.
I see. And that's why they need her.
That's why they need her. Yep. And when her sister was killed, they were like, we don't have anybody else. And then the unicorn was like, well, actually, about that.
So what happened? So how did her sister get killed?
A rogue minotaur broke into the palace somehow and got her.
And why would a rogue minotaur break in? Go to all that trouble? Just like there are easier ways to slate your lust for blood than breaking into a castle and finding one specific girl.
So let's just say that he didn't break in by himself. He didn't break in by himself. He was brought in under other pretenses and then managed to get free and went after her and killed her.
And he went after her because that's who he was supposed to. That's who he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a targeted assassination.
It was a targeted assassination, and it was by minotaurs because they are the most feared creatures in the country.
I wonder what deal they had to make with them to get this one minotaur to do this, because that's kind of a suicide mission, even for a minotaur.
A little bit, yeah. So, I'm not there. I don't know, because I wasn't there. So I'm not 100% sure what they managed to convince him to do, but they did.
What and why did they want to kill her? They don't want her. She was supposed to be making a deal with dragons, and if she's in a castle, I guess she didn't set out yet.
My understanding was Darlena was never going to be allowed to go, and they were at that point still sending some people or sending envoys to go and find the dragons.
Why wouldn't she be allowed to go?
Well, because she's the only one of her lineage. Same with Deirdre not being really allowed to go, but Deirdre decided to go anyway.
So I guess she's going to have to escape from the castle without anyone knowing.
Pretty much that's the plan, yeah. There's a ball coming up, though, so perfect time to kind of sneak away without anybody watching.
That's true. That's true. Just slip out and pretend to be one of the guests. Especially if there's a masked ball or something, even easier. No one knows who anybody is under the masks.
So, yeah, it does kind of make it a little bit easier for her to escape at that point. And she has Lady Judith's help to do it, too. So
I see. So Lady Judith wants her to go.
Lady Judith is going with her.
Oh. Oh, wow. Why is she wants to make sure this one doesn't get killed?
Pretty much, yeah. So there's a few people who are going to go, as it turns out.
So who else is in her party, and what skills does each member bring to the party?
So for the party, it's not so much skills, just a willingness to help. Lady Judith knows the countryside, so that's one of the reasons she's going, and she also knows where to find Jack. And she has the ability to give them the horses, to give them the supplies, to help them get out of her area and onto the right track the right way. Kind of knows, like I said, knows the region a little bit more. Lady Margaret is going with them as well, and it's mainly Lady Margaret is just very loyal to both Lady Judith and to Deirdre at this point, and wants to go along to make sure things get done correctly. And there's a couple of others that go along as well.
Are they taking along any muscle?
Well, the Minotaur's going with them, yeah.
So he's the bodyguard.
He basically ends up as the bodyguard, and I mean that's kind of what the agreement was between them, is that he would protect her and she would protect him, and the way they protect each other is very different. He'll stand up against physical threats for her. And she'll be like, yeah, no, don't kill him. Don't kill him. Don't imprison him. He's with me.
I see. So, is the areas they're traveling through, are they safe? Or are they going to be running into bandits and, other difficulties?
They're going to encounter other things, but the main thing is that they're being pursued by the main antagonist.
I see.
So he will be after them.
It doesn't sound like they're going to be able to put up much of a threat aside from the Minotaur. They better be running fast. Get those horses into a gallop, ladies.
They'll have a couple of days head start. So
interesting. No, this is cool. So you mentioned before that there's going to be 3 books in the series.
There are, yep.
Are they out or?
The second book, The Ivory Queen, is out. Yep, that is out. That kind of wraps up most of Deirdre's arc with finding the dragons, but things still go sideways at the end, and that will continue on into the Ebon King.
And that's only going to be a trilogy, this series.
As far as I know, unless I have to split the Ebon King, there's a lot that I know has to happen.
So we'll see how the characters do in the third book.
Tell me, and it's like if they're like, no, we're not done yet. Like, oh, okay. But the plan is to get everything wrapped up, hopefully by the end of the Ebon King.
If you leave it to the characters, you will never be done writing. They will string you along
in my head in case we absolutely need it. So we'll see what happens.
Is there a 5th?
No, haven't gotten that far. Thank you.
Well, there's plenty of chess pieces to choose from. I think you're right. You're not going to run out for a while.
Well, I mean, you go through pawn, and then you go through queen, and then you go through king. There's not really much higher than that.
Well, there's the rook, and there's the
we could do
castle.
Stories.
I forgot what that's. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. It sounds like a cool world. Do you plan on revisiting it in any other series, or is this the only one?
Possibly. There are tie-ins. There's going to be tie-ins across a number of different stories. There will be connections between characters. So that much I already know. There's another series that I've started. I have the first book out for that. It's called Wolves Running, and it's set in this world, but it's dealing with various animals who have gained the ability to become human, and their recent discovery by society and what they're going through. So
what's that like, to have been an animal and suddenly you're like human and you're like, whoa, what is this?
It goes back into mythology history with the Shapers clans, but they've just recently become known, widely known. There have always been people who knew, but they've become widely known by society at the beginning of this book. So
right. But from the character's point of view, like, you spend your whole life as an animal and then suddenly you are not an animal.
Well, they actually spend most of their lives as humans. They gain the ability to become animals around puberty, sometimes later. And they get their shape then, and they get whichever, usually it's a lineage through the family. If they're wolves, then they have wolves as their animal, which the main character does. But way back in the mythology of the characters, there were animals that were trying to deal with this new creature who was lighting fires and setting fires to the places that they lived in. And they're like, they're not listening to us and we can't talk to them. Is there a way that we can work with them? And the spirit of that land was like, well, if you were willing to take on a human form at times, then, and it kind of evolves from there.
That's neat. That sounds like a really fascinating story, especially for those characters who were animals, suddenly become a human to try and talk to them. And do they
But again, that's in way back history.
Yeah.
So they live mostly as humans, if they're part of society, and some of the other ones are not as closely tied to society and live out in the wild with some of the regular animals as well. So it depends on what their clan chooses to do. But there's some tie over between some characters that'll show up between Kirlismus and these characters.
No, that's really cool. Now my brain is like exploding.
Well, you'll have to check that one out. You'll have to check out Wolves Running. So,
Wolves Running. I was going to say, what was the title of that again?
It's all in the link tree. You can find everything in the link tree. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will be in the show notes or the description, depending on where you're watching or listening, and that'll be as always, we put all the links in there. Well, all the links that I get, anyways. um, is there anything you want to say about the Crystal Pawn, or the Ebon King, or the Ivory Queen, or Wolves
Well,
Running?
I definitely can say the Crystal Pawn, it very much is introducing the characters, getting things moving, getting the characters going. Ivory Queen is really where the adventure, I mean, the adventure's going in the Crystal Pawn. This is when they leave Curlismus and they are entering into different territories, meeting very different types of characters, crossing the Alari Desert with the desert tribes down there, going and meeting some other shapers that live down in the jungles below the Alari Desert, and just meeting up with some of the other characters, including the dragons. So it becomes very much more of a, we're not just in medieval style fantasy land, which is more Curlismus. We're now expanding outward. The Ebon King is going to be a bit of a split between the one group that's trying to finish out the riddle that they were given, or the prophecy that was given to them, and what the heck does this mean? And Deirdre, who has stepped aside from all of that at this point in the Ebon King, and has to go and solve another problem, but it's no longer a magical quest. So not quite the same way it has been up to this point. There's still some interesting magical overlay that's going on. And this summer I actually was working on a short story that takes place before the Crystal Pawn, but then ties into the Ebon King through the characters in that short story. So we'll see.
What's that sort of story about, and when is that coming out?
Well, it all depends. Hopefully, I've submitted it, and I can't talk too much about it because I don't want to ruin anything. It's been submitted for consideration to an anthology through the Independent Fantasy Addicts. So that will hopefully be the tie over between the two things. And it will give you a little more insight into Minotaurs and the culture, and give you a little bit more insight into how certain things in the Crystal Pawn occur.
Interesting. So is the Crystal Pawn in the self-published fantasy blog off number 9? Or did did you find me through the IFA group?
I think I found you through the IFA group.
Okay, because there's some people found me through one place or the other, and I'm like never sure, like, because if it's one or the other, there's different things we do after the close of the podcast. So yeah, no, that's very cool. I hope you get into the anthology.
Thank you. And eventually that story will be available. I think there's a time limit after it's in the anthology that you are allowed to put it elsewhere. So it will eventually be out for availability. It's only about 28, 29 pages. So it'll probably be a small piece that'll be available. But I think it came out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. And it solved a number. You ever have that happen where you write something that's a side piece and it solves problems for something else that you were struggling with in another piece of your writing?
Oh yeah, that's what the current book that I'm writing is supposed to be doing, but the characters decided they didn't want to do that.
I hate it when you do that. They get ideas.
They've decided that this standalone book that was supposed to solve a plot problem that they created in another book, and that no, they're going to do it in the sequel that was not supposed to exist. So now
I teach English classes, and I always tell my writing students, my creative writing students, I'm always like, yeah, and oh yeah, by the way.
Yeah, if you listen to characters, yeah,
your characters will take on a life of their own, and they look at me like I have 8 heads. Like, how can that happen? And it's kind of a fun thing to discuss.
I can tell you what to tell them for how that happens, because there's a number of different ways that happens. One, the cool idea. It starts out with, wouldn't it be cool if? Yeah. And then you're like, oh, tell me more. And then before you know it, you're off writing about a heist in hell, and you're like, wait a minute, this is not what this is supposed to be about. And then the other character's like, well, this is such a cool thing. Let's keep that. And instead of doing the thing we were supposed to be doing, we're going to do this other thing that ties into it. But we are not going to tell you how it ties into it until chapter 35.
Right? And you're like, oh, is that how it worked?
Then you're too deep into it at this point, and then they're like, "We'll do the thing you wanted in the sequel, we promise." And you're like, "Yeah, at this point, you better."
It's like I talk about in the Ivory Queen. One of the things that happens is that there's a scene that I added as I was going through the final edit, and it was basically Jack Barnes was talking about how he was upset, you know, that something was going on. He was being excluded from spending time with the Queen, who at this point is dying. You know, and all of a sudden he gets very angry and storms off, and I'm like, wait, that I didn't see that happening. When did that occur? And he just did, and he just walked off, and I'm like, okay, then fine. I was just as surprised at
Yeah.
the action of the character. And it takes me back to, you know, Ray Bradbury, who's like, you know, I go to my characters and I ask them who they are and they tell me. So,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
the
Oh,
whole idea
yes.
that they
Yes.
just get ideas and they
Yes.
do it.
We don't name characters. They wander onto the stage in our mind and with a name and a backstory, and they
Yep.
don't care if it screws up what you were going to write,
Yep.
you know. And sometimes they come on with families, and you're like, wait, I just needed one. I needed you for one specific thing, and
Right.
they're like, no, I'm not doing that. And by the way, I have 6 kids.
Well, it's like
Or
another one.
something,
It's like,
some other like,
when did you become gay? When did I ever think that this was part? Wait, okay, I guess you are. That's great.
yeah,
And you just weren't expecting it.
or the love interest decides, no, I don't like him at all. And I'm like, okay, all right. Thank God we don't write romance. This is why I don't write romance. Characters wander on and they're like, and they have wildly different ideas about what they're going to be doing in here than what I had. And I'm stuck. If sometimes it's like herding cats.
It is. Yeah, getting them to do what you want them to do, it definitely is
Angry,
like herding cats.
feral cats
Sometimes
with
they're angry,
3-foot
sometimes
long
they're
claws.
mischievous, sometimes they definitely have a mind of their own. So for sure.
Always. And the more characters you have, the more minds, the more they just can gang up on you and decide we're going to do this
Oh yeah.
instead of what you wanted.
Oh yeah.
And then before you know it, you've written 21 books in the same world.
Well, it's like occasionally it's like I talk about the muse kind of jumping you and grabbing you by the short hairs and just coming like, you're doing this. Wolves Running was started January of 2021, and it's the fastest book I ever wrote. And it was 2.5 months of I couldn't do anything except write. And I had to write this book. And it was, you know, I started it right before the end of Christmas vacation because I teach English in the high school. And I'm like, oh, I had this weird dream. I'm just going to jot this down. And then 2.5 months later, I'm like, okay, I'm alive again. And I had a
And you're
book.
like, wait, how did we get from the dream to the finished book?
Right?
And
And
it
then I
seems
wrote
like
it
a
the
fever
ending.
dream looking back at it. You're like,
Yeah.
sometimes the dream and the final book have nothing to do with each other. And you're like, how did I get this book from that dream?
Oh, I can definitely see where the tie goes, but I know that when we were editing it, my editor and I were going through it, and I hated the ending by that point, and I scrapped it and rewrote the ending. So the book came out 2 months later than I originally planned because we were going through the final edit. I'm like, I hate this ending, so I had to scrap it and rewrite
And
it.
they cooperated, the characters.
The characters
mean,
actually were happier.
Okay.
They're like, oh, we get to go back there? Yay! So they were very happy.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Because I mean, sometimes the ending is a negotiation.
No, we didn't need to negotiate. The characters were willing. They were like, yeah, we like this better too.
I have to negotiate often. They would keep going, and I'm like, no, we solved the problem. Now we have to end the book.
Yep.
So we can work on the sequel. You can have more page time in the sequel, but we have to end this somewhere.
We've got to stop here. We'll be back.
Give me a place to close things out so we can start the next book. Yeah, characters are wild.
Me with the Ebon King because who knows what they're going to do with me there, but that's all right.
Prepare.
We have to come back to this world, and we have to end up on Cape Cod for at least a short time. So we'll see how it goes.
Prepare.
Prepare
for mutiny. Or for like them not to get to where you needed it to go, and you have to like figure out something else.
Well, and I'm wondering because I've started work on some planning for the next Shapeshifter series book, and there's definitely going to be ties there too. And I'm like, there's going to be a crossover somewhere in here. I just know it. So
yeah,
because
Like
that one's set
char-
around here. Wolves Running is set in Colorado, which I had never been to until this past June, where we're like, let's go out to Colorado and see what it actually looks like. It was pretty close. But this one, I'm like, yeah, let's stay closer to home so I actually don't have to travel that much.
Oh wow. Mine is all second world fantasy, so I don't have to travel anywhere to write it. A lot of it looks suspiciously like New York State because I live there.
It works. We're trying to figure out things that we can tie in with this next coming book, and there's an interesting place in Massachusetts called Ponyhenge. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
And it's just out in the middle of a field. It's a whole bunch of
Where's
old like rocking horses. And I think it's in
Oh,
Lincoln, Mass. And they're
Lincoln,
formed
Mass.
in a circle and a circle inside the circle, and it's named Ponyhenge.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, look it up. It's pretty funny. It's wild.
I'm
It's
gonna have to.
one of those weird Massachusetts things. And
I mean, the whole
I grew up
state is
in
kind of
Mass.
weird.
So I grew up there. I understand.
I mean,
Um,
come on. I grew up in New York,
yeah.
so the Boston, New York,
Oh yeah.
rivalry is strong.
It's real. It's definitely real. But
Especially
yeah.
if you live in the southern part of New York, in like close to New York City. Like it is very real. It is a way of life.
I don't know. I'm far enough away from Boston that I can be like, yeah, you guys do your thing over there. We're fine.
Oh no, like I grew up in the southern part of New York State, and like the tickets, if you were going to go to a Yankee game that summer, you wanted the ticket. You wanted to know when Boston was playing New York, and you wanted tickets for that game.
Oddly
Or
enough,
the
that's
Subway
very
series.
similar up here. Yeah. Oh, the Yankees are coming. All right, we got to go see them.
Yeah, it's just a thing.
It is a thing.
It is. Yeah.
So
And then, in other sports there's other things, but in
right, but
baseball
with
that is
that,
the thing.
yeah, we've had some students who've walked into the school with Yankees hats on, and we're like, you sure that's a wise choice?
Yeah.
Like,
And I see plenty of Boston fans in the city. And like it's totally fine. Like it's like between the fans, it's because I've been to the Red Sox versus the Yankees
yep,
games, and like the rivalry is only on the field. Like outside
right.
of that, everybody is a fan of the sports.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
it's pretty
there might
friendly.
be some gentle ribbing, but like nothing beyond that.
Right. I have yet to see anybody beat each other up for baseball.
No, yeah, yeah. It's definitely not a thing. Um, but yeah, just one of those things that I remember as being a kid, growing up. Is that, and that was the game that everybody watched on TV. Whether or not you actually liked baseball, like that was the one everybody put on.
Yep. Oh, it's them. We've got to watch them.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it,
Yeah. Oh, I totally get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. It's I feel like every sport sort of has that one
Mhm.
key rivalry, whether you're into the sport or not, you sort of have to pay attention to, because
Yeah, you
everyone
do.
around you is going to be discussing it and you don't want to miss out.
Right.
You need to have an opinion. Now I don't care, but when I was a kid, like that was like a thing. I
Yeah.
remember. We've drifted far from the fantasy books. We are
Oh,
here to
don't
talk
worry.
about fantasy books.
Honestly,
And you asked the question about like crossovers, and like my
yeah.
characters are currently trying to plan a crossover between 3 series. I'm trying to fight them, but I'm losing the battle horribly. They might get their wish.
I occasionally just let them. It's like, okay, that's fine.
I let them have the crossover between 2 series already because they're closely related. But these other ones, it's kind of a stretch, and I'm like, guys, this is gonna be really hard to plot. Can we not do this, please?
Right.
For
No,
my sanity. I'm not winning this one though.
no. And sometimes you just it's like right now I know I need to work on the Ebon King, but this second shapeshifter book has been like nattering at me, so I have a sneaking suspicion I'm headed that
It's
way.
it's sitting on your shoulder,
Like,
whispering in your
hey,
ear.
hey, hey, you could do this. Hey, hey, you could do that. And I have
Or
some
wouldn't it be
cool
cool
ideas.
if?
Yeah.
That's the one
And
that gets me. The wouldn't it be cool if? And I'm like, really? Tell me more.
oh yeah. So we'll see what happens. And I absolutely, I'm working my way through like, how is this going to work? Where are we going? What are they going to do? Ooh, we're going to involve that. That's going to be cool. So
Yeah. and the bigger and the shinier the idea, sometimes you're like, I don't really care how it's all gonna work. It's give me more cool stuff.
We're just gonna make this work. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
when we edit it later, we can make it make sense.
great to be able to work with things around the area that I know are going to be really neat to put as part of the story.
How is that gonna work? Because like, it seemed like your books are set in like a second world fantasy, not in
Well,
our world.
for
So
the Shapeshifter series, like with Wolves Running, the second one of that is going to be set here, so that'll work easier. But
here on actual Earth,
here
not
on
in the same
actual Earth.
world
Right,
where
right.
Perilous and
Crystallia,
Crystallia.
yeah.
Crystallia. I'll
Um,
get it.
no, it's okay. It's fine. But like I said, the crossover is going to be that they, as I said, there's links between Kirilismus and this world. So there's a
How
hole in
does
the
that
bottom of
work?
the ocean sort of thing.
How does
Occasionally.
how do you have links between our worlds and like the fantasy world? I mean, I
don't
have them too,
know.
but like I have a portal and it's in my apartment. That's how I explain it.
Well, there's definitely a portal at Mountain Reaches out in the garden. There's an old gate, and that one is a portal, and that was created. But there are others that people have found. Like Jack Barnes is from our world, and he
Oh,
found his way in by accident. And so some other people have found these portals before over time. So
that's wild.
yeah, I know where a couple of them are, but I don't know where most of them are.
Oh, you have to discover them in future books.
Apparently.
Lots more for you to discover. And lots more for readers to discover too.
Pretty much.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. And maybe you'll be back with another book another time.
Oh, definitely.
That's awesome. And thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. And today we were talking with Deb Jarvis about the Crystal Pawn, the Ebony King, the Ivory Queen, Wolves Running. Did I get them all?
I think you got them all.
Thank you so much. We'll be back with another episode probably tomorrow with another fantasy author and another fantasy book. So tune in then. Until then, I'm Melinda Kucsera, and thank you so much for listening.